Great. So I'll let kind of folks trickle in a little bit here. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you everybody for joining our webinar today. My name is Andrea McDonald, and I am the program lead with Salmon-Safe BC. I also have joining me today in the audience our program manager, Teresa Fresco, and our communications coordinator, Paul Coisy. And I'm calling today from the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish Nation. We encourage you also to recognize and reflect on the land that you're living and getting your food from. As we know, Indigenous peoples have been the original and long-term stewards of these lands that we're so grateful to live and be able to farm on. For those who may be joining us for the first time, Salmon-Safe BC is one of Canada's first eco-certification programs that links land management practices with the protection of watersheds. And today we're focusing our spotlight on some of our agriculture producers with a focus on our farmers. And as long-term stewards of these lands, farmers play a very key role in helping protect and restore native salmon populations and maintaining healthy watersheds more broadly. And this is the case particularly now in times of climate change. And our Salmon-Safe certified producers provide a vision for voluntary adoption of resilience building practices that can keep healthy streams healthy enough for salmon. And because salmon act as an indicator species, we know that if salmon are thriving, the watershed also has the potential to thrive as well. And before I move into our webinar content and pass it off to our speakers, I just wanted to make sure that folks are familiar with Zoom functions. For the remainder of the webinar, we ask that you please remain muted. So you'll see at the bottom left of your screen a little microphone with a slash through it. So as long as it has that slash, that means you're muted. You're welcome to leave your video on or off. You would have been alerted beforehand that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the Salmon-Safe YouTube playlist on the Fraser Basin Council YouTube. So if you aren't comfortable with having your video on that, then by all means, please keep it off. But we do encourage you to have it on. It's always nice for speakers to be able to see everybody else's faces and reactions, of course. And lastly, I wanted to acknowledge that the webinar will run from 12 to 1 today, and we'll try our best to end on time, of course, but there may not be adequate time to address everybody's questions without rushing through the presentation. So if you do have to leave promptly at 1 p.m., please feel free. You can either email us at salmonsafebc@fraserbasin.ca, or you can leave them in the chat and we can work to incorporate them in the webinar or send in a follow-up email as well. So this webinar is part of a two-part series that focuses on salmon-safe agriculture here in BC. And if you scan the QR code on your screen, you can register and learn more, especially about our next one coming up on the 16th of February from 12 to 1 p.m. And this one is in partnership with the Shuswap Watershed Council to showcase their phosphorus action plan and sustainable nutrient management. Salmon-Safe BC is hosted by the Fraser Basin Council, which is a non-governmental organization that promotes social well-being supported by a vibrant economy and sustained by a healthy environment. And by participating in the farm program, farms are recognized for things like optimizing water use, maintaining healthy riparian and in-stream habitat conditions, using long-term soil conservation techniques, exercising nutrient and pest management practices that can protect water quality, and then contributing to the overall habitat quality and productivity across the farm. And as you can see, I've listed the 7 farm standards on the screen here that our farms and vineyards have been practicing. And you can also visit our website to learn more or email us to find out more information if you yourself would like to be certified, incorporate into policy, or just learn more about the program as well. So today we're showcasing 3 of our agriculture producers to share their experiences in the program and talk about their efforts to incorporate salmon-safe and sustainable practices more broadly into their farms. And we'll be starting off with a presentation from David from Persephone Brewing Company, followed by Mark from Glorious Organics, and then Jim from Cedar Isle Farm. And following the presentations, we will have a brief question period for participants to ask questions, and I'll kind of explain a little bit more when we get to that point. And without further ado, I'll pass it off to David. Oh, you're muted there, David.
I said, thank you, Andrea. I'm also coming to you from unceded Squamish Nation land here in Gibsons on the Sunshine Coast. Thanks to the Salmon-Safe folk for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. As you can see from this first slide, this is our 11-acre farm in Gibsons. We brew and operate market gardens, apiary, orchards on this farm. You can see how close we are to the water right there. So everyone's runoff ends up in the sea eventually. Ours ends up there like that. We are not on city sewage. So our water doesn't end up in a treatment facility. We have to treat it ourselves. We have an on-site water treatment facility that gets the water to better than city gray water, essentially. So it ends up contributing to the health of our watershed. We're pretty proud of that, and we get that through various methods. We run our farm using regenerative agricultural practices. That actually sequesters carbon in our soil. There's no till. We don't use artificial fertilizers, so that excess nitrogen isn't ending up in the watershed. Do a lot of things as far as the brewery goes to lower our carbon footprint. Our farm runoff water is combined with our brewery waste water as well. So that all ends up in our treatment facility and ends up being cleaner than city gray water. That's we also use considerably less than most breweries. Your average brewery in Canada uses about 4 liters of water to produce 1 liter of beer. We've got that down to about 2 to 1. So we about half that. We do that by reusing wastewater, irrigating with our wastewater, where we benefit from having this 11-acre farm because we have lots of food crops that need watering. Frankly, we ran out of water this year. The main supplier for the Sunshine Coast Regional District is the Chapman water system, and it was so low at the end of summer. We had quite a drought at the end of summer. And they actually cut us off. They cut ALR land off. They cut all the farms off, even 2 weeks before they cut off our brewing operations, which I think priorities are a little out of whack there, that we were able to brew beer, but the people supplying us with food were cut off weeks before us. We instigated a water program with some of the locals where we captured wastewater. We partnered up with some of the breweries and cideries on the coast where we captured wastewater and trucked them around to all these farms to make sure that they can maintain. Part of our brewery, so our brewing operations on the site take up about 5% of the actual footprint of our land. That means something to us because ALR agricultural land reserve exists to support food security. So I don't think it would be using it right to just plant 10 acres of hops or 10 acres of barley and only supply our brewery with what our ingredients. Plus those result in monocultures, and it's that much harder to be sustainable when you're just growing 1 or 2 crops. So as you can see from this photo, got a sizable market garden to the left there. We've got a very large market garden at the top and a really large compost facility. So we're really proud of our compost. All of our spent grain, all of our spent hops, all of our food waste from our in-house kitchen ends up in that. We actually have neighbors who have horses, so we get a little boost of horse manure in there. We have done soil tests, and we have some of the healthiest soil in the Sunshine Coast, and we're really proud of that. That is in part because of our brewery. Because we have a brewery operating on this farm, it increases the viability of our growing soil, which means a lot to us. So the least glamorous part of our farm operations is probably our compost. But something that we get really excited about because it just makes it that much better to grow on. And you'll notice at the bottom left there, that's our water treatment facility. It's not a pretty part of the farm. It's not a very nice smelling part of the farm, but it's a very important part of the farm, and that ends up right into the ditches. It flows by our neighbors. So if it wasn't even for environmental sake, our neighbors don't want to smell any yeast blooms or what have you, or bad water flowing past them. And yeah, you'll see the mountains in the background. There is actually Gambier Island with some of the North Shore mountains in the background. So we are conveniently on a slight slope, so our irrigation works really well. All the wastewater from the brewery at the top of the farm there runs downhill into our wastewater treatment facility conveniently, and we separate all our solids, all of our liquids. So the liquids end up in water waste in the waste treatment, and all of our solids end up in that giant compost area. I often make fun of our founder. I think he started this business just so he can turn compost with a tractor. He's in there almost every day, making sure it's turned and keep going. And that very bottom there is a great example. That used to be right there below the cars, below the parking lot. It used to be an irrigation pond before we had our wastewater treatment facility. So it was more of a demonstration irrigation pond. In this part of the world, we don't need irrigation, 9-10 months out of the year. But it was great to show that you can capture your wastewater and use it to water our crops. Because of the issues with water security at the moment, we are actually building a well on site this year. So we're going to dig a very deep well. We won't be able to brew with it for about 4 or 5 years. I think that's how long it takes to actually get it certified and approved for consumption. But we'll be able to irrigate it with it right away. So that makes our food crops that much more secure. And yeah, that's a very important part of our operations, definitely. You'll see, and there's the barley. No, please go ahead. That is, so I'll be honest, we don't grow enough barley at the moment to brew with. No one's growing fermentable grains, like beer quality barley anywhere near the coast. That's why most of our barley farms are in the Peace River region and up north. We grow barley, one, because it's a great cover crop and increases the viability of our soil. It helps our soil health. And two, because part of the new Agricultural Land Commission regulations requires us as a brewery to brew some fermentable grains. That's as far as it goes. So we grow some fermentable grains. We don't necessarily brew with them all the time. And like I said, we could dedicate 10 acres of our farm to hops and barley. It would be a fraction of what we need to brew as far as our capacity goes. And I think we're using the land far wiser to grow food crops. And frankly, that's what agricultural land is for. It's for food security. Yeah, but that is a pretty picture. There's a nice overview. So you'll see our outdoor beer farm there, or our tank farm, we call it, right above our 2 greenhouses and roughly 1 acre market garden. And above that, out of the picture, is another roughly 1 acre market garden. And then the one part of our farm that's undeveloped is that big green patch down there. So we're cover cropping for the last few years, increasing the viability of the soil. We had some hop plants up there. They're not there anymore, but there's a fledgling apple orchard up there. And we're actually looking into carbon neutral certification now. So it's really interesting, the process of that. But the fact that we have 11 acres and it's run using regenerative agriculture, I think is a big bonus for us, because we're actually capturing culture. We're not capturing carbon. We're not just reducing our carbon footprint. We're actually helping to reduce it for others, frankly, and those around us. Yeah, and there's a pretty picture of us all. So happy that we got our Salmon-Safe certification. We've been certified for 2 years now. And we got certified, right at the heart of the pandemic, which is why we're all masked up in that photo. And thrilled to be a part of it. Our next step for us, so our farm is certified Salmon-Safe. Our next step is actually getting our brewery certified Salmon-Safe. We'd love to get to that point. But like I said, all of our brewery runoff is combined with our farm runoff. So the fact that we've got our farm certified Salmon-Safe bodes well for our brewery for sure.
Awesome. Do you have anything else to add before?
I'm sure I do. But yeah, happy to open it up to questions at the end, and yeah, I can elaborate there.
Fantastic. Okay, yeah, I'm sure lots of folks will definitely have questions. You guys are kind of a poster child in terms of sustainable brewing, and I mean, absolutely delicious beer as well. I can't complain. So I'll now.
One more thing, we are the only certified B Corp brewery in BC, and if we can get through that certification process, I feel like we can get through just about any. We just recertified, and we're breathing a sigh of relief, because it's quite the process, and we're really proud of it. I often say we don't do what we do to be a B Corp, but we're a B Corp because we do what we do. It's a great overall capture of our values.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks, David. That was fantastic. And just for the sake of time, I'll pass it right on to take it away, Mark.
All right. So I'm Mark at Glorious Organics, and I'm the farm manager here. And I've been farming here since 2011, which is actually the year that we became Salmon-Safe. And I believe Salmon-Safe started in 2010. So we're one of the original farms to do that. And I'd also like to say that we are uninvited guests on the unceded territory of the Kwantlen First Nation. So our farm is it's pretty different than a lot of other farms. We're a cooperative farm that came around in the 70s. Basically a group of hippies got together and were like, we want to farm out in the country, have a connection to the city. So they started Fraser Common Farm in Aldergrove. I believe that was like the late 70s. And then a small group of those people started to farm a portion of the land in about 1986. And they got a contract with the Expo in Northwest Territories, of all places, for growing greens, something that people weren't very familiar with at the time. It was mostly just lettuces, and it kind of expanded from there. And we have basically been a certified organic farm since that point. And up until 2006, it was an ownership of a small group of people. And then in 2006, it actually became a workers' cooperative. So we are certified organic and Salmon-Safe at the same time. And we found that they like really coincided with each other. We feel like it's important to keep ourselves and farming in check for customers and for the environment. And for us, getting Salmon-Safe was like the next step of like how we take care of the land, and for not just to say what we're doing, but to actually have checks and balances around that, which we felt was really important. The one thing that's really interesting about our farm is that we actually have a stream that flows through our farm property. And so in this picture here, actually, the older fella, Dave McCandless, he sadly passed away just over a year ago, but the reason I added this in here is because he's wearing his salmon shirt, but also because he was a huge advocate of salmon, and he was always maintaining the stream that was flowing through our farm, because every fall we actually can see salmon flowing through our property. There was 1 or 2 years where we didn't see them, which which is kind of like a panic thing for us, because we're like, oh, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? Because it's really nice to go down to like one of our fields. We have a little bridge that goes over it, again, for protection of the streams. We have put in culverts in places to allow water to flow without disturbance. And there's this one particular spot we can be and actually look down and see salmon spawning in our stream, which is extremely exciting. And therefore, especially because we can actually see the salmon in place, we're particularly protective of it. So we keep, tractor work does not happen too close to the streams. We use certified organic compost from someone that we know very well, like a soil scientist. We don't use any other fertilizers other than a fish fertilizer, like a fish emulsion fertilizer, and our own composting teas. And so we felt like it was really important to be Salmon-Safe given our particular farm property as well, because in 2000, like before my time, the original farm actually purchased the other farm next door to it. The farm was attached. So originally it was 10 acres, and then Fraser Common Farm decided to purchase the 10 acres that was directly next to it. So now it sort of functions as like one large farm. And so where Salmon-Safe comes into play is that the stream flows through both properties. So we've kind of taken both properties and protected on both sides. Whereas like, I'm not sure what would have happened if two different owners owned the property. Like, we have like a wetland that we maintain in between the properties that's like pretty integral to the salmon. We have beavers here, herons, and we're actually just in Aldergrove. Like, we're not like in the super country. We're like, we're just off of 16th, close to the border. about 45 minutes away from Vancouver. So we keep a pretty environmentally and protected area in this like small piece we have in Aldergrove. As you can see in the picture here, this is just one of our main fields. So up top, actually, where the sun is shining, below that, there's a natural spring that runs consistently down into an irrigation pond that we have. So we collect all of our own water for irrigation in this field. Somehow we got lucky enough to have a natural spring that flows into this pretty consistently. And so we've had like really good luck with water in that field. But like Dave said, we've also had big water struggles. This past year, one of our wells went dry. Luckily, because we're two properties, we actually function off of 3 wells. So if one more runs dry, we can manage it by doing that. But again, it really shows the importance of taking care of the water on the land and not messing with like the flow of the water through our property and the wetlands, because the wetlands it determines how high our aquifer is next to especially one of our wells. If it's really low, then we know that we're running into some water issues around that. Also, the other thing is if it stays dry for too long, the salmon can't get through, because there's a part of our property that the salmon flow through that gets very dry in the summer, like almost completely dried out. And it's amazing to think that it fills up and then salmon actually flow through there and spawn. But yet every year they do, because nature's going to nature, and nature's usually going to win. But we're just kind of protecting it as best we can to make sure they can continue to flow through here without much issue, and without really, like, we try not to do anything that's disturbing those areas at all. And we have a very diverse farm. As Dave was saying, it's extremely important not to just be growing a monocultural crop, because nature has its cycles, and I think that it's all connected to salmon as well. And I think it's important to have a diverse property rather than a monoculture crop. So this here was one of the things that's like always the most exciting, and it's probably not going to show up too well here. Well, there you go. You can see on the left. So this is the stream I was talking about. Every October, we go down pretty much daily, and we watch and wait to see if we can see some salmon. And oftentimes we see some pretty heavy activity. Dave, the person I mentioned earlier, whose picture was up earlier, he would often go down and sit on the stream for like hours at a time, waiting for the salmon to come through, which is also like very sweet. And it was always a very exciting time for everyone to be like, the salmon are here, and we would come down and run. So it's become like a really important thing, not only like for our farming practices, but just for our like own values and how we want to see the world moving forward. And salmon I think it's a good symbol for that. Yeah.
Fantastic. And yeah, that's not only is that a beautiful story, but it's also nice for you guys to have that like true indicator right on site, so you can see how the ecosystem is doing based on how the salmon run is, I guess, as well. I mean, obviously confounding factors outside of your control, but huge kudos to you guys for being able to farm so close and have a healthy salmon run at the same time. It says a lot.
It's also like an indicator for us too, for a lot of things. It's like, the season's coming to a close, like salmon are here, like there are things we need to do. It's like, I don't know, it's like our own like nature's farmer's almanac or something. Like it just kind of gives us this information every year. With climate change, obviously these things are changing. Hopefully we can get back to a good place, but it's nice to see salmon in the stream when you after going through a drought. It gives you a bit of hope.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thanks, Mark. Yeah, and everyone keep those questions in mind. And of course, as Teresa's outlined, you can post them in the chat as well. But we'll hopefully, I think we're running on good time now, so we'll pass it off to Jim and then open it up for questions afterwards. But there you go. I'll advance the slides, and Jim, you can just tell me when you want me to move to the next slide.
Hello, I'm Jim Grease Alvarado, and our family has the honor of being the stewards of this 94-acre, most of an island, surrounded by Maria Slough, which leads straight into the Fraser River. It's about halfway between Chilliwack and Hope in the town of Agassiz. And you can see Highway 7 crosses Maria Slough there in the top right-hand photo. So we probably driven quite close to our place as you drive from north side of the river from Chilliwack to Hope. We are nestled between the Agassiz Canada land at the bottom, just growing corn, bottom of the picture there. And at the top is Seabird Island First Nations we serve, our close neighbors and friends. There's a salmon, DFO salmon spawning channels. There's one just below the A in Agassiz there in the slough, and another one underneath the J in the slough on the left, and there's another one on top of our island to the left, and another couple further upstream. So we too, like Mark and Dave, feel very close to the salmon habitat quite directly. Could we go to the next one, please? One of the things we just want to emphasize is that we are an island, so we're completely surrounded by water, and we focus on maintaining the riparian zones in treed, well covered, and we'll get to that a bit later. But like both Mark and David, we very much highlight the importance of diversity for resilience. Next one, please. We are certified organic as well as certified Salmon-Safe, and as Mark mentioned, we do see them as quite complementary. And I have to say to other producers, if you're considering the two, well, we found the Salmon-Safe to be exceptionally what should I put, a friendly process to join, and we're quite we feel very much part of the community, which is the only reason why we think about going on doing the presentation, because we feel so strongly about the program. We rely very heavily on legumes for nitrogen fixation. We don't grow cover crops, incidentally, because they grow themselves. So this particular picture is a field of wheat, spring wheat, which has been harvested, and the grain taken off, the straw baled and taken off. And this is plowing the understory, which came up naturally, of mostly white clover and some grass, to plant a winter wheat crop. This is about two years ago. Next one, please. Our farm, the vast majority of it is for silage and hay in terms of acreage. And we farm with 2 dairy farms in close proximity, and we rely very heavily on their manure inputs in order to cross-subsidize nutrient status for the grains and forage that we export off the farm. Next one, please. Of course, ensure that the amounts of manure applied in the timing zone is closely monitored. Focus is on heritage wheats, and we also grow specialty and Hoas oats, rye, some barley, but mostly wheat and a specialty Hoas oats. It's always a challenge though, growing grains in forage country. Next one, come up. Yeah, on the left there is one of our heritage grains marquee, which got heavily dodged, and this is a repeated problem in Fraser Valley, because this is, after all, rainy and windy forage country. Then we also have to deal with disease problems, more lodging down there with a rye crop, which, if you're really lucky, you can still manage. So I think the story here for us is to try and be like a miniature research station the last little while, and trying to come up with types of grain and particular varieties that are disease resistant and will work in our system. Next, please. So on the top right, we've worked benefit from the work that's done at Burlington at Washington State University. They developed the grain winter wheat Skagit 1109, which is well suited for farms west of the Cascades. Unlike many of the Canadian varieties, it's also highly disease resistant. Our down at the bottom right there is our son growing some of the seed that we've been multiplying up for over a decade of heritage hard red spring wheat Marquis, which is the grandparent of most of the Canadian bread wheats. And the crossing was originally done in Agassiz. And now the center picture at the top is we have enough to combine for our community supported agriculture group. Bottom left, two pictures, and the center bottom, it's Michelle Karkner from the University of Manitoba. She introduced us to the participatory plant breeding program, which the Bauta Family Foundation assists with. And the university there has been instrumental in making a cross between the Marquis, the old variety, and a modern variety, trying to get something that's agronomically more easier in the Fraser Valley. So we've essentially developed with them our own landrace of grain, if you will. And we now market that to the community supported agriculture group. We call it our Manitoba Cross, for lack of a better term. And it's a really good bread baker too, like the heritage one. Next, please. And of course, lots of our equipment is small, it has to be. We want to maintain the human scale grain production, and we also want to maintain the diversity. So we can't grow the whole farm in grain. It wouldn't work and be far too risky. But you can get good crops. And the next, please. Those are wheat crops there, which we harvest into tote bags. Put through some processing equipment, most of which is old, but some of which is fairly sophisticated, like the gravity table up on top there, which separates grain that's already been sorted on the basis of width and length and weight and blowability, and it separates on the basis of density, which has allowed us to save our own seed without planting weed seeds every year. Because of course, if you're into specialty grains, you can't just buy them off the shelf. We have to grow them yourselves. So much of our grain goes to, we put in a truck, some of it gets milled at Anita's Organic Mill in Chilliwack for our community supported agriculture group. It's like a once a year vegetable box program. Only it's for grains, and both for flour and for grains. And we have a main distribution center at the Italian Cultural Center in Vancouver, where people come and pick up their shares. And we have several other outlets at market gardens and so on. Down below is their grand opening of Kitchen Staples, and they are a shop designed to reduce packaging. So it's a refill center, and they carry much of our grains. And then Yoshi here is with his two young sons. Well, they were then young, at our Vancouver Farmers Market. So next, please. He grows his own vegetable market garden site on the right there, focusing on out of season crops. And here's what they look like this week. And he's got a bunch in storage, but it's a challenge clearly. But he's been doing a lot of experimentation on types of crops, trying to get the off-season crops going. And Diane, my wife, is on the left. There's got our mulched domestic garden, which we expanded, and it now serves as like a pick your own cooperative venture for half a dozen local families. Next, please. And we really value didn't realize it's at first, but a valuable byproduct, which is the straw from the grain. So even if you have a crop that isn't necessarily producing the best grain in the world, you can usually, with good luck, get some decent straw. And this, of course, we use our own mulch, but also is shipped. Actually, some past Gibson's, believe it or not, some down Mark's Way, and some down the Fraser, just like the salmons too. This is a market garden in Richmond with a couple there using it for garlic mulch. And they're one of our distribution site, Kingdom Care. Fabulous. Next, please. we're very focused on stewarding our habitat, and this is our central wetlands area in the center of the farm, next to one of the houses there. You can probably see the wood duck house on the tree in the distance, just barely make it out. Next slide, please. This is fed by a water system, very rudimentary, but it works. From a water license, surface water license we have up on the hillside, and we keep these this habitat well fed as much as we can through the spring. Next, please. It may be rustic and it's labor intensive, but it does keep the water flowing. And of course, lots of emphasis on keeping the beavers happy along the way. We put up not just wood duck boxes, but flicker boxes and many tree swallow boxes, and here's some in the barn. And we plant with pollinators in mind as well. Next, please. One of the big jobs this winter has been clearing out about 15 years of blackberries that have taken over our riparian zone. And the trees on the right there are ones that we planted about 25 years ago or so, and have been fenced out from the cattle that we had at the time. And of course, we had kids, which turned out to be our main crop for our farm for about 20 years. And now that they're gone, we have to turn our attention to catching up some of the other jobs around the place. And so we splurged and bought a new piece of equipment, believe it or not, which is this side mounted mower, flail mower mulcher, which has made all this possible. So we hope to restore this riparian zone to be a little more richer and healthier zone for other trees and habitat generally. Next, please. Our farm wouldn't survive without a very cooperative community. We depend on it, and we try and give some back too. This is we have a rice producer who comes to clean grain at our place, Massa, and here's a local group cleaning some beet seed, which is notoriously hard seed to clean because it sticks together on a gravity table. And next, please. We try to welcome many of our CSA members to our farm, where they can see their crops growing, see how it's processed. And we also put a lot of emphasis on educational benefits of having a place that people can come to and see a variety of activities underway. Here's a UFE class on agriculture under Dr. Prasad, who runs a wonderful program there. Next, please. And Yoshi, our representative at the farmers market, of course, has a good network of people who come back for whether it's eggs or grain or vegetables that he deals with. And this is Huane Greer, who's actually a noted filmmaker who did a film on East Timor years ago. She's having her opening this Saturday, just for those who are interested in Vancouver, on Canada's involvement with the country of Haiti, which is bound to be a very good film. If you could take it in, have a look. Part of our CSA emphasis has been trying to encourage activity that's broader focused. When the Agricultural Land Commission was considering some land not far from us, a few kilometers away on the other side of Agassiz, development for commercial and residential use, our CSA members rallied behind and wrote many very thoughtful and useful letters to the Agricultural Land Commission, reinforcing, trying to encourage them to do what they ended up doing, is maintaining the integrity of the agricultural land reserve. So this area here on the other side of Agassiz was protected for future agricultural use. Next, please. But that just illustrates the power of community. But of course, like the other two farms ahead, there are challenges ahead, and this is taken in the height of summer when it's hot. The cedar trees there, which are the namesake for Cedar Isle Farm, are having a hard time, and you can probably see in the close side there that a good half of the grove is actually dying out. And we're quite shocked by that first, but we take it in stride and try and figure out a way forward there. Just in terms of creativity, this crop, this is winter wheat crop, harvested in August, early August. Not a good crop for grain, and it was heavily competed with by grass. And we made the most of it by baling it up. So it's like a grass straw mix, which of course you wouldn't want to sell to market gardeners because it would just create a grass problem for them. But alas, there's a separate market for all those horses that are way too well fed in the Fraser Valley, and those people are wise enough to know that feeding them really dry grass with straw that doesn't have much nutrient status is actually good for them. So we managed to place that otherwise waste or compostable straw into a very valuable market. But of course, there are blackberries growing there too on the side of the fence in the distance. Next, please. So there'll be constant work ahead. And not just work, but crises. I mean, we've had excess snowfall, ice storms, as you can see, and thick, sticky snow that curls off our roof and does terrible things to buildings that were built before we had decent building inspectors. And floods, of course, we know the farms that have been totally washed out. And we know that farms down Abbotsford Way that were flooded extensively. Here we are running at bottom left, the slough is running quite brown and high with the amount of water that's coming off the hillside. And yes, even this November, we had a fire on the mountain behind us there in the center. Next, please. So yes, there are challenges ahead. And it seems to us that for not just agriculture, not just Salmon-Safe, but for generally, what we will require is cultivation of our relationships more than ever. So just here's some of the people who are involved in our farm, but we know that every farm, every human being has similar sorts of relationships. So the next one, please. Well, if you look at the picture there, with a she's looking at trying to a set of worms there. They've been drawing our garden mulch down under the ground, and bringing the organic matter. So we need to draw strength from each other in whatever community we live in. We need to see in every small moments of beauty. And finally, we can look to this leek in the middle as an example. It froze, seemingly solid this winter, only to emerge intact from its protective mulch as organic Salmon-Safe straw just this week, and that's where the picture was taken. And it seems to me to be a symbol of all of us that working together to nurture a New Year's cycle. We can do this by using creative resilience, cooperative progress, and collective hope. So leave it at that. Thanks. I'm open for questions for all three of us.
Well, thank you all. I know I learned a lot, and I always do, speaking to all of our producers. So a virtual round of applause. That was fantastic. And I'll open it up for questions. I'll also stop sharing my screen so we can see each other's faces. So if you do have a question, you can either post it in the chat and it can be read out, or even better, you can raise your hand and I can call on you and you can unmute yourself to ask the presenters.
Andrea, there are some questions in the chat.
If you have them faster than me, you can go right ahead and read them. Sorry, I got lots of tabs open.
Absolutely. So actually, Jim, there's a question for you from David, your fellow panelist. Jim, have you considered growing Kernza?
We haven't, but there is a whole list of grains that we would people would encourage us to grow, and we're trying to reduce our numbers a little bit, if I could say. But we'd love to be encouraging of other people who would be interested, and we'd be glad to help out.
Thanks, Jim. And another question for you around mixed cropping. to improve resilience and biodiversity benefits, and whether there are any opportunities to do that mixed cover cropping.
Well, we find that the grain fields we shift. As I say, most of our fields are in forage, so it's silage and hay, and then we use the grain and move the grain down the year by year through the grain field, so that the grain derives benefit from the nutrients from the plowed sod and the burst of nitrogen that it gets, as well as the legumes. And in addition, we're also using up a lot of the phosphorus and potassium that can be excess for dairy farms. So in a way, we're exporting that problem from the land in a way. But at the same time, we're also deriving more nutrients, including micronutrients, from the constant input of dairy manure. So I don't think we could do the grain setup without an input of outside nutrients. But at the same time, I think that the transition of the nutrients back to forage is also really helpful too, and it gives us a natural reseeding time. And as I say, also deals with some of the nutrients as well. So I think the other thing that I find quite encouraging is the whole understory of the grain. That when we plow in the fall, or sorry, when we harvest in the fall, we don't have to do anything to the crops in the winter. Our fields didn't blow in the wind. In fact, but we're also sensitive that they can do very easily. We didn't grow a winter wheat crop this year. We didn't grow a fall rye crop this year because we thought it was too late to plant for us. It was just too dry. We couldn't plow. And I know that people growing corn crops are mandated to grow a cover crop, and that's a good thing. But it was so late this year that a lot of them got caught, so the grain wasn't high enough, and the wind was blowing lots of land away. So I think we have to go with this with the challenges that we face in our stewarding and try and do the best we can. But cover cropping, I think, is key to the whole. It's not just cover cropping, but mixed cropping and keeping the scale manageable is essential in all of this. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. This one is for you, but I think can also be for David and Mark. So beyond your CSA community, what is the response from your traditional farmer neighbors or your dairy farmer neighbors and the local government? Are they supportive or dismissive? And I'll open that one up to all panelists.
I'll just go first before the other two. Wildly supportive, I would say, generally. Some of the other producers think it's a bit wacky, I would have to say, because after all, who would grow grain in forage country when you can grow forage? But at the same time, I think that seeing the diversity and our ability to take advantage of dry seasons, like we always get something. If the forage isn't growing well, the grain usually is. And if the grain isn't, the forage is. And usually both of them are. So I think that's seen with some interest by other producers, recognizing that it's a heck of a lot of work. But if other people would get into it, I think having nodes of cooperation would make it really helpful for other people. So if anyone else is interested, please give us a shout. But in terms of local government, and suppliers, we can't supply enough grain. I mean, everyone would like us to put the whole farm into grain, whether it's a pizza maker or a bread maker, a Bad Dog Bread in North Van, Lonore Pizza in New West, who makes spectacular pizza. I mean, there are bakeries that call us all the time looking for more grain than we can produce. So if other people want to enter into it, well, be great. So I'll pass it on to Mark and David.
I guess for me, I'm in a bit of a challenging spot because I'm actually surrounded by mostly chicken and blueberry farms and not ones that are particularly leaning towards environmental protection. So I actually don't have a relationship with most farmers out in this area. The relationship that I have with people mostly are from Vancouver and surrounding areas, mainly because that seems to be more where people are into environmental activism and whatnot. I have seen it start to change out in this direction. Certainly we have built up our CSA program in this area a lot more, which is, to me, is an indicator that more and more people are caring about things like certified organic and Salmon-Safe. They pick up on our farm, and we like have our Salmon-Safe certificate like blasted right on our wall, like where they come and pick it up. So people who don't know about it have an opportunity to ask a question of like, oh, what's this? And we haven't had a lot of engagement from local government either, to be quite honest. There's a lot of growth happening out here. So we'll see what happens with that. And you know, with growth, sometimes can be good, sometimes can be bad. We're kind of waiting right now to find out where that's going to go. Hopefully it won't impact our waterways and Salmon-Safe.
Our neighbors are very, very supportive. It helps that they can come hang out and drink beer and cider and have a good meal on the farm. So it's a real visceral experience for them. We get a lot of support because frankly, there's not a whole lot to do on the Sunshine Coast, but especially when we opened, there's several more breweries and cideries now, and some nice foodie locations and such. But yeah, we are, you know, without tooting our own horn, we're a bit of a darling in our community. So we're really proud of that, really proud of the community support. We do a lot of things in our tasting room as far as speaker series and just garnering the support of the community. Also, our neighboring farmers love us because we produce more compost than we can use ourselves. So we offer it to neighboring farms and they get the benefit of that. The government is a different story. It was the Sunshine Coast Regional District that cut us off of water. You know, and it's like I said, their priorities were a little bit out of whack. That food farmers were cut off before industry was cut off. They continued, you know, building development and all sorts of things that could have been cut off long before they cut the farms off. Also, as far as you know, a little past local government, we fought for the right to brew on this land for a couple of years. When we first opened, there was no language in the Agricultural Land in the ALR Act that spoke to breweries on farm land. There was language in the ALR Act that spoke to wineries and cideries, and we just assumed we would get slotted in with that, but we didn't. They decided to write all new language, didn't really consult with any farm-based breweries to talk about the logistics of it, and their first go at it meant we had to grow. So I'll say this quick: wineries and cideries have what we call the OR clause. They have to grow 50% of their ingredients on their land or buy the remainder of that 50% from another BC farm, which is great. It supports wineries and cideries and supports BC agriculture. We assumed we'd get the same clause. We did not get the same OR clause. They required us to grow 50% of our ingredients. So where we were growing lots of hops at that time, hops are a fraction of the actual ingredients, whereas barley is 90% of the ingredients in our beer. To grow 50% of our own barley, we would need 200 acres of land in the Peace River region, not anywhere near the coast. We couldn't keep up with it. So we spent a good year and a half lobbying the Liberals in an election year, and they didn't want to make a decision in an election year, and didn't want to get too political with it, but the NDP got in. NDP is very supportive of agritourism and small business, and they changed some of the letter of the law in the Agricultural Land Act. And I mentioned it before, we have to grow some fermentable grains, so that puts us in compliance, and we essentially get that OR clause as well. So we've always bought far more than 50% of our ingredients from BC farms. So we've always been in compliance. It's just they actually had to change that compliance. So we're in it now. But that was a harrowing year and a half where we thought we might get shut down. Oddly enough, we also brew cider. So as a cidery, we would have been able to maintain our cider production on the farm, but we wouldn't have been able to brew beer here. And we would have kept our tasting room open. We would have had to find somewhere else to brew beer, which is going to raise our carbon footprint and kind of act against, you know, the whole idea of the ALR.
Thanks, folks. There's one more question, Andrea, if we have time. I see we have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I think we can fit in at least one more. I only have one more slide, really.
Okay, so last question, and oh, of course, when I said that, another question popped up. So let's see how we go here. So I'll put this question out to all of our panelists. And the question is whether any of the presenters are working with any local Indigenous communities on integrating traditional food and or medicinal crops, or considering the concept as part of your own ongoing production planning, maybe as part of set-asides or hedgerows, ? So just a question around involving local Indigenous communities.
I'll say quickly, we'd love to be more involved on that side. We reach out to the Squamish Nation on a regular basis to see how we can work with them. Up in Seashell, there's the Seashell Nation as well, and there's Salish Soils, which is runs actually our compost program on the Sunshine Coast, and we partner up with them as much as we can to talk about any initiatives we can push on the Sunshine Coast, and just push the discussion of local food security further. That's poignant. I just finished reading Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a beautiful book on that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, we've had some connections for sure, as we've had like groups come out and tour our farm and have discussions around different plants, Indigenous plants that we could add into our hedgerows and whatnot. We're actually kind of in a bit of a planning phase to like bring in more hedgerows, because with the climate change stuff that we've had and the forest that we've had around our property, we've lost quite a lot of trees due to like flooding and drought all at the same time. So we're actually in the process of like making some pretty big changes, which we plan to include some Indigenous food crops and medicinal crops into. We do have a woman on the farm who was the originally started this farm. Her children are Indigenous, and we often consult with her and her family about stuff like that as well, and they have for quite some time. And we're also connected to the Tawasin Farm School and the Kwantlen School, which oftentimes will have groups come out and tour the farm as well. But more work, always more work.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mark. So we do have one more question. I wonder if we may just respond to that via email. And folks, do encourage you, if you still have more questions, it's okay to put them in the chat. We would circulate those across our panelists and then be able to get those answers out to you following the webinar. So I'll turn it over to Andrea to close.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you everyone for such great questions. And we also welcome all forms of feedback. You know, these webinars are for our audience to learn more about the program, about our producers, our urban program as well. So if you have any feedback, we do welcome that. And you can scan the fancy QR code on your screen. I'm sure everyone's very familiar with those these days. And that should take you to a form that you can fill out and provide us some feedback as well. And then please do stay connected, and you can follow us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and find us on our website, salmon-safe.ca. This will also be posted in the next couple of days on the Fraser Basin Council YouTube. We have a playlist channel there as well, so you can find this recording and all of our other webinars there as well. And lastly, thank you to our presenters and to our funders and our supporters, which includes you. We hope you've learned something today. I know I have. And consider Salmon-Safe in the future as a tool for healthier watersheds in your community, whether you know someone who might benefit or pushing for better, more sustainable practices. We're always here to help and lend advice where possible. So we really appreciate everyone joining today. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions.